Hey, yo, Pro Wrestling Podcast listeners, welcome to the show where we don't sing it, we bring it. Help us out and click subscribe to show your support. And if you're a YouTube user, click the bell to get notified every time a new show goes live. Are you sick and tired of dropping $60 to $100 for the latest and greatest wrestling video game? Stop immediately. Go to Wrestler Unstoppable, available exclusively through Facebook. Create a wrestler, sign contracts, get involved in storylines, headline pay-per-views, even build your own corporation, all included in Wrestler Unstoppable, available now to all Facebook users totally free. If you want to become a member of the Pro Wrestling Podcast family, you want your name in the shout-outs like my good buddy John down in Texas, then check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/Pro Wrestling Podcast. Sign up today. If you're a $15 a month contributor, you can host an episode with me live. If you're a $7.50 a month contributor, I'll enter you into a drawing to also host a live show. Everybody, welcome to this episode of the Pro Wrestling Podcast. If you've got questions, comments, something you'd like us to address in a future episode, shoot us and drop us a line over the Pro Wrestling Sound Off line 267-642-1160, and we will get to those topics in a future show. And if you've never done it before, stop by the homepage of the Pro Wrestling Podcast by going to prowrestling.com. Okay, jumping into the news for today, we're going to bounce around quite a bit today because there's a lot of things going on. First off, we've got to start with New Japan Pro Wrestling. They just held one of their great events. They have so many events throughout the year that are just really full of surprises and excitement. This one was headlined by Kazuchika Okada retaining the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship. The item coming out of the show that I thought was the most interesting was Juice Robinson returning to New Japan only less than a month ago, talking about how he had nothing left to do in wrestling. There was nobody left he wanted to wrestle. And people really started to believe that this was a legit thing, that he was kind of thinking of hanging up the boots. He had done everything he needed to do in the wrestling business. I am thrilled to see him come back to the business. I really am. I think he's an untapped talent. He's got so much more to offer. My concern is the name, Juice Robinson. It's great when you're a mid-carder or you're just starting out or you're just coming up. At some point, he needs to pick a persona that a major corporation can truly get behind, because if you've ever watched him work, he's incredible. Fantastic in the ring. I have nothing to complain about. The only problem I have is the name. Pick something marketable as a main event talent, because that's the potential that he has, is to be a main eventer. And I wouldn't mind seeing him get in the ring with Kazuchika Okada, Hiroshi Tanahashi, or any of these other guys that New Japan has that are at the top of the card. But we've got to strategically place him in a way to do that, and they have yet to do that because, for no other reason, just the name holds him back. The other surprise return at the New Japan show was the Good Brothers. Carl Anderson, Doc Gallows showing up and getting involved with New Japan for the first time since, I want to say, 2015, 2016, somewhere in that time frame. Love seeing them go back, starting a whole Bullet Club thing, feuding going on. I think that's something they've needed for quite some time, is to get back there. They have done so much all over the place. And people, I think, sometimes look at them as not being a very successful tag team. Let's talk about that. They've held the Raw and SmackDown Tag Team Championships. They've held the Impact Wrestling Tag Team Championships. They've been New Japan Tag Team Champions multiple times. They've done almost everything there's to do. What, because they didn't go to Ring of Honor or AEW, somehow they don't get put in the same conversation as people like FTR and teams like that? I think they are every bit as good as many of those teams, if not more marketable, because they're better on the stick than a lot of the other teams. Don't get me wrong, I'm not dumping on anything FTR is doing, because they are doing some incredible work with some of the best teams in the world right now. But I just don't like when certain teams who are really putting on a great show don't get some of the just due they deserve. And let's be honest, when they were finishing up in WWE, they were being given a whole lot of nonsense to work with, putting them on Christmas promotions and almost a comedic act, and then being sidekicks to AJ Styles, which is fine if it's a powerful thing. But when you look like you're just the jobbers who take the fall for AJ Styles in that whole situation, that's not good for them. That's not good for their characters. I don't blame them for wanting to get out of that and go somewhere else. But at the end of the day, I think they're an incredible tag team. It's great to see them back in New Japan, where they experienced probably, debatably, their greatest success, unless you consider the fact that they were WWE champions. Yes, that's great. There's a lot of people who've been WWE tag team champions that are nowhere near the level of what they are. So I don't know where you rank that, but New Japan Pro Wrestling, a lot of respect comes with winning championships in New Japan. It really does, especially as a gaijin and someone who's not a stalwart of the Japanese dojo. So kudos to them for going back. In other New Japan news, Tetsuya Naito, one of their biggest stars, going to be out for the foreseeable future, having eye surgery. He's got a superior oblique muscle paralysis in his right eye. It's making it so he has double vision. So he's going to be out for an extended period of time, hoping he makes it back in time for the G1 Climax, which if you're not a huge New Japan fan, I heard this week Booker T talking on his show about how he doesn't know that American fans care about the Forbidden Door pay-per-view because they don't care to watch New Japan Pro Wrestling. I have I have no idea where he's getting that from because if don't get me wrong, there's a difference between a die-hard wrestling fan and a mainstream WWE fan. Mainstream WWE guys, fans are the ones who tune in to WWE only. They don't really go looking for other wrestling because they're not so much wrestling fans as just they love the production and the storytelling of WWE somehow. Um, when it comes to the wrestling fans, true wrestling fans know exactly who New Japan Pro Wrestling is. And what's kind of shocking to me is if you have the opinion that he has, how do you explain AJ Styles' debut when he comes to WWE for the first time after having been in New Japan before that for like 2 years, and before that, Impact Wrestling, which on the best of times was nowhere near WWE standards as far as reach or anything like that. It's even less than it was more than AEW, but people argue the AEW people don't get the kind of recognition they should. So I don't know. I just think it's an interesting way to look at things when you're trying to determine the success and viability of somebody, the whole New Japan product coming to the United States. I think people, when they get to see Okada wrestle, are going to lose their mind if they've never seen him before. He's that good. He is my dream match is he and Seth Rollins. I mean, that's just he and CM Punk, he and Daniel Bryan. Like some of those matches would be just unbelievable. I honestly think that AEW is the partner to do it with because WWE would water him down, and he and Seth Rollins are going to have to wait for another day further down the line if they're ever going to have their match, or WWE's got to loosen up what they're willing to let people do. At the same time, much more physicality, realism in the AEW product, much like old school ECW. I think there is a location where Okada and Punk or Okada and Bryan can really tear the house down. I'm looking forward to seeing that. In addition, not that it's an AEW or New Japan thing, but it runs on that edge. I love what they did on Monday night with AJ Styles and Finn Balor joining forces, the former leaders at two different times of the Bullet Club. Finn Balor, when he was Fergal Devitt, being the founding leader of the Bullet Club. AJ Styles replaced him a little later on, 2014 to 2016 ish. I love putting the two together. I thought they should have done that years ago, back when they were teasing it at Survivor Series a few years back. They should have done that. I don't know why they didn't. And they're obviously not using Finn Balor or AJ Styles to the maximum capacity they could. This would give them an opportunity to be in a faction. I don't want to see them as tag team champions. I really don't. I just want to see them together doing things. I wouldn't mind if as Edge builds his stable, if AJ and Balor built theirs and pull something from there. It would be very interesting. But I did like the angle, and I think it shows promise. Somebody who does not show promise in the WWE right now is Roderick Strong. The report coming out that he requested his release. He's been asking for his release for a long time. Now they're saying the WWE's trying to refute that report, saying he didn't ask for his release. I get it. Roderick Strong hasn't been doing a whole lot of stuff that matters lately. His Diamond Mine stable just lost some members and things like that because of budget cuts, which we'll get into in a moment. But let's be honest, you can't just keep having people leave WWE and think they're going to go to AEW and hang with their friends. And I feel like that's kind of the narrative that's out there right now about talent. And even if that was the case, let's say Tony Khan he knew Tony was going to hire him. I don't think it's a good idea. It's not a good look. You keep hiring people. What ends up happening is you almost have to cycle through your talent. People were complaining a couple weeks ago about the Hardys being on Dark. Well, when you have a roster that's enormous because you sign everybody, there's not enough TV time for everybody. So what are you going to do? You got to put them somewhere. So you put them on Dark so they get screen time, ring time, bring credibility to that show, and you still keep them fresh and active because you're paying them to be. But how many people can you possibly add? Like at some point, you got to stop adding talent unless you're going to put together either a longer show and give more screen time, or find some other way to validate those people with multi-person matches and whatnot, which people were complaining about last year. The AEW did too much of that. So I don't know what the fix is for it, but just because he asked for his release, I'm actually with WWE on this. You don't just grant every release. At the same time, this week they did do some releases. Many people know they let some people go. They let go of Dexter Lumis, who in my opinion is one of the most incredible untapped talents they've ever had. Brian Alvarez from the Wrestling Observer actually stated that he got a list of the 10 names prior to being announced to the general public, and that Dexter Lumis was not on the list. He was almost surprised, or pretty much was surprised that he was on the list. And For those who don't know, Dexter Lumis used to be Samuel Shaw. He wrestled in Impact Wrestling. Now he's back on the Indies. His first booking is already announced for ARW. I thought they missed the boat with him. I really do. I think that the reality of Dexter Lumis's character was in NXT when he first arrived, it just this silent killer kind of attitude was perfect. And he started really getting over the fans. They just never pulled the trigger on putting a championship on him or putting him in any other better position. He was almost like a blonde-haired Undertaker in a weird kind of way. And I'm not trying to compare him to the Undertaker in terms of talent or viability or marketability. I'm just saying he just had that aura about him. It was really, really awesome. And I wish they would have done more. Same thing with Dakota Kai. Dakota Kai, also one of the cuts. Hers is more heartbreaking because I think she could have been main event Raw, SmackDown roster type champion. And they never really gave her that opportunity. 2 women's tag championship reigns with Raquel Gonzalez is one thing, but she could have had so much more and deserved so much more. And the reality is she was not going to renew with them anyways because she wasn't happy with her position in the company. Malcolm Bivens, another one that was let go. Not surprised. I have no problem letting him go. What is he doing? He's a mouthpiece on a third show in a company that's trying to revamp their roster of people that are up and coming. Why spend money on somebody who's just going to talk? If it really is reverting back to a developmental territory, which is what Tyson Kidd was saying earlier this week, he really loved the old black and gold brand. But if we really are going for this this cultivation company all over again, then Malcolm Bivens doesn't hold any value. But Dexter Lumis, he should have been a main roster call-up at some point and never really got there. You had Harland released, who was supposed to be so promising, but if they don't make progress in 90 days, they're going to start cutting people. That's the word coming out. Dave Meltzer was talking about. Draco Anthony, Raylan Devine, Vish Kanya, Milana Milani, Blair Baldwin, all budget cuts this week. It's a shame to see anybody lose their job, but people keep complaining about WWE doing this. They're not the only ones doing it. AEW this week, Jack Evans, Marco Stunt, Joey Janela, their contracts all come to an end. Stu Grayson, the latest one, his portfolio just drops away from AEW. The word is he couldn't come to terms on a new agreement, and that's why he's out. He could still come back. The other 3, they just let him go. Joey Janela wanted to get back on the indies. Marco Stunt, they haven't used him forever, which is a shame because he was kind of over. And Jack Evans, he's an aerial artist who just never really found his niche. I don't know what they're going to do with Angelico now, who was his tag team partner, but we'll have to wait and see. Maybe they could put him on the new TV show that's being rumored to come out for PBS. They're developing a show. They put out a survey with all these different names on it, like AEW Breakout, AEW The Climb, AEW Fight to the Finish, AEW Grit and Glory. It's like a reality show they want to create with AEW talent. Sounds to me a lot like Tough Enough. I wish AEW would just stick to AEW because at the end of the day, that's what people love about it. Is it's not the same kind of WWE overproduced sports entertainment nonsense. And I feel like if you open up another show that's a reality show, that's exactly what you're kind of leaning towards. Speaking of talents, possibly signing AEW, former Impact star Jake Something, who, if you've never seen Jake Something on Impact Wrestling, which wouldn't surprise me because nobody watches Impact anymore, which is a shame, he's wonderful. I think he's really skilled. He's a big, buff, dude. He has a lot of skill. He'll be on Dark, and I hope that this leads to something because he's another guy, he's a big guy, but he's agile enough to really bring something, and I think he could really if given the right opportunity, could be somebody you could really cultivate down the road. You got to be able to bring up new stars. He's somebody you bring in now. He's not a major star yet, and you grow him and you help him hone his skills and make him into one of the best of all time. Speaking of segue, Kurt Angle this week talking about Chris Jericho surpassing Shawn Michaels as the greatest wrestler of all time. And look, I'm not going to get into a big debate about this. Kurt Angle is one of the greatest superstars in the history of the business. If he tells me that Jericho is better than Shawn Michaels, I have to at least give it serious consideration. Here's my issue. Shawn Michaels came through the Attitude Era as the flag bearer during the hottest period of time in the wrestling business. Did he stay? Of course, he was slightly before the Austin explosion where WWE really took over. But the reality is, and I remember this from one of the documentaries talking about how WCW might have been killing it in TV ratings, but they weren't putting butts in seats and house shows and things where WWE was. That's how WWE remained profitable during the time that the 83 weeks that they were losing to WCW. But Shawn Michaels was the headliner during those 83 weeks, and he was the one drawing the houses. So even if he wasn't reflecting on television, because people who watch TV want an edgier product, and that's what WCW was, the true athletic product that drew people to the arenas was Shawn Michaels. So I look at that fame, and don't get me wrong, I am not dumping on Chris Jericho. I love Chris Jericho. He was nice enough to have a conversation with me in Philadelphia International Airport at the bar one time. Nice guy, great guy, and anything I've ever heard or seen about the guy has always been positive. And I think he is absolutely one of the greatest of all time because of his ability to change his character, evolve, going from being, you know, WCW Monday Night Jericho to Raw as Jericho to the Code Breaker, the Y2J, the wearing the scarves and the Festival of Friendship to the Painmaker, Jericho Appreciation Society, and all points in between. He has done so much over a longer period of time than most people do it in this business. I'm not taking anything from him. And to be 50-something years old, 51, 52, whatever he is, doing it for 30 years or more, that's insane to me. And I have nothing but respect for Chris Jericho. Where he ranks versus Shawn Michaels, I don't know. I'm not trained as a professional wrestler to know the subtle nuances of what makes somebody better than somebody else from a professional wrestler's perspective. What I can tell you is, as a fan, these guys are both off the charts. I would give anything to see the two of them wrestle forever and still be in their prime. I really would. I don't know who the best is. And I've been asked, I get questions from you guys on that sound off line, 267-642-1160, if you want to give me a shout out. Asking me who my Mount Rushmore is. I don't know. Because Mount Rushmore is 4 people, and I don't think you can narrow wrestling down to 4 people because there's too many elements in pro wrestling. Whether it's in-ring ability or charisma, the crowd response, the way they drew money, the number of championships they had, the territories they were willing to go to, the schedule they kept. I mean, think about the people I'm talking about. Schedule, Ric Flair. The charisma, Hulk Hogan. The in-ring ability, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, those kinds of people, and maybe Ric Flair. The people who had the best mic skills, Roddy Piper, MJF, people like that, Chris Jericho. There's so many different things that go into being the best. John Cena never had the best in-ring skills, but he drew better than almost anybody, especially coming out of the Attitude Era. He was the next big thing. So, and no pun intended with the Brock Lesnar conversation. And nowadays, like Roman Reigns what he's doing in this era is unheard of. Nobody keeps a championship this long in WWE in this era, but his drawing powers allowed him to do that. Am I ready to put Roman Reigns on the Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling? I don't know, because I don't know how you can have only 4 on that list. And everybody I've mentioned has nothing to do with the people from back in the day. George Hackenschmidt, if you don't know him, look him up. Insane. John Tolos, and people like that. The Crusher, Vern Gagne, Nick Bockwinkel. Dory Funk Jr., who I think is one of the most underrated greatest wrestlers of all time. Harley Race. Lou Thez doing it till he was in his 70s or 80s. What constitutes the best? And I don't think there's an answer to that. I really don't. Bruno Sammartino. I don't know if you can name a best. What I can say is, no matter what Kurt Angle's opinion is, Kurt Angle's one of the best. He really is. But at the end of the day, we can't have just 4. I don't think that's fair to all the other talents who've come along the way, who've done so much for the business and been so good at it. I think it would it creates too much controversy to try to narrow it down. That's all the time we have for this episode. Check back with us next episode. We'll run down the latest wrestling news and rumors. Special thanks, as always, go out to bensound.com and purpleplanet.com for producing any music or sound we use in our shows. Today's show is sponsored in part by Beazle Games. Bring a new friend to family game night. It's easy. Grab a copy of Sketchy People from our homepage at frowrestling.com. If you're looking for your next career move, you're considering college or university life, or you just need some formal training for your next career decision, go to our sister website at frolifeplanning.com for all your higher education needs, as Fro Life Educational Planning is for today, for tomorrow, and for life with Fro Life. I'm Fred Froelich, better known as Dr. Fro. I want to thank you for taking a few moments with us tonight. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next episode. And don't forget, always support indie wrestling. In my area, 3WA or Triple WA, Worldwide Wrestling Alliance, incredible shows. I am sure there is a great company near you. Check it out and support those local guys. They are where we get our mega stars of tomorrow. Take care, everybody. Have a great night.